All right, so we've been working on factoring, like many weeks ago when I actually saw you guys all the time. Today we're going to actually take our factoring and now we're going to learn to solve. Okay, so we're finally going to solve an equation. All right, so to solve, we use the zero product property. Do I care that you ever remember that name? No, I just care that you know how to use it. So what it's saying, though, is if A times B equals 0, then what do we know? So what does that mean? What's it mean about either A or B? One of them has to be 0. Right? Because think about how do you multiply to get 0? Sometimes 0, right? Then either A equals 0 or B equals 0. The only way to multiply to get 0 for an answer is one of them has to be 0. Okay? So if I look down here, notice these are already in factored form. Right? This one, there's nothing to factor. This one has, like, you pulled out your GCF, and this one's just factored like normal. Okay, so these are already factored for you. Notice every single one of them is set equal to 0. So if I asked you to solve, 5 times what equals 0? 0. X would have to be 0 here, right? 5 times 0 equals 0. All right, how about here? This is saying x times the whole piece x minus 3 equals 0. So that means either x equals 0 or no. Nope.
X equals 3.
Or x equals 3. Very nice. Now you're like, wait a minute, where did that come from? The same way here, where if I multiplied two things, one of them had to be 0. So obviously, if this is 0, then you have 0 times 0 minus 3. 0 times anything is 0. Okay, so that one makes sense. So where he got 3 from, if x is 3, that means 3 times 3 minus 3. What's 3 minus 3? Negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6. So what he did is figured out what would you plug in for x that when I subtract 3, it gives you 0. Okay? So in other words, what you're doing is you're setting each factor equal to 0 and solving, right? X equals 0, that's the first factor. This is the second one, x minus 3 equals 0. If I asked you to solve that, you'd add 3. So that's where the x equals 3 is coming from. You're setting each part equal to 0 and solving and figuring out what your x value would be. So what about on x plus 2 times x minus 1? Well, again, you'll get good at this where you don't have to write these steps down. But the process is you're setting each factor equal to 0 and solving. So I'd subtract 2. So x equals negative 2. Or I'd have to add 1 to solve. X equals 1. So the two answers for x is either negative 2 and 1. And again, the reason being, if I plug this back in, negative 2 plus 2 is 0, and 0 times anything is 0. If I plug in a 1, 1 minus 1 makes this one 0, and 0 times anything is 0. So you're finding the numbers that work. We will get in the next chapter to looking at a lot of graphs and solving. Yay! The good news is I very, very rarely ask you to graph by hand. Most of it's done on the graphing calculators. If you look up here, though, one thing we can look at is wherever a graph crosses the x-axis, those are the zeros, or those are the answers to that problem. So I don't know what the equation is looking at this, but I can tell you that if I would solve it, x would equal 3 and x would equal 6, because that's where it's crossing the x-axis. A what?
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of break this down for you step by step for those who like steps to follow. So steps for solving by factoring. Step 1, put equation in standard form. What is standard form? Ben? What were you going to say? That is not standard form. That is slope-intercept form. What do you mean?
Like when it's like for example, 5x. There's a number first, then for the grade.
Kind of. There's more to it than that. Chris? That's the Pythagorean theorem. You remember a lot of important stuff, you just don't know what it's for, right? Standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's standard form for a quadratic equation. And think about all the factoring we've done. What order have I always stressed to you that they're in? It's always your ax squared, and then your bx, and then your number. And now we're talking about solving, so it's always going to be an equal sign, and then equals 0. So if it's not set equal to 0 to start with, you're going to have to move things to make it equal 0. Okay? So then you'll factor completely, whatever that may entail. Could be difference of squares, could have a GCF, could just factor 2 sets of parentheses, whatever it may be. And then set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So if you remember how to factor, this process should not be too terrible for you. All right, so let's go ahead and do number 1. So step 1 is to set it equal to 0 or put it in standard form. So we're already equal to 0. Next step is to factor. So first thing we look for in factoring, is there a GCF? Nope, no GCF. Okay, so we'll go right ahead and set up our factoring. My last one is negative, so what are my signs? Good. Options for A. 1 and 1, so 1x and 1x. Options for C. Okay, oh, that's a weird looking 3. All right, and then we're trying to get a 3 in the middle. So what combo do you think? Probably 6 and 3 would be a good guess. All right, can I just throw numbers in there and assume I'm right?
Yes.
It's probably not a good idea. I mean, you could, but it is not a good idea. But again, if we need to check, we can. Just make sure it's been a week since I've seen you guys, so make sure we know how to do this. 6x minus 3x is the 3x I needed, so I know it factored right. All right, and then the new part for today, because all that stuff we've already done, you set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So x plus 6 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, and then solve. So what does x equal here? Negative 6, and x equals positive 3. Is anybody not okay that I did not show the minus 6, minus 6? I didn't show that stuff. You guys okay? Add 3, add 3. All right, what about number 2? What's your first thing you ought to do with number 2? Even before that, it needs to be set equal to 0. So that's first step of standard form. This has to be your x squared, then your x, then your number, and then equals 0. So we're going to have to add 12. Does the 12 actually add to anything on that side? No, there's no like terms there. So we're going to have x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0. So that's the first thing we want to do. Set it equal to 0. Then we'll look for GCF. Is there a GCF? Nope. So then we'll go ahead and set up our parentheses. Last one is positive. What are my signs? Good. In this case, they're both minus. Options for A. Options for C. And which option is it? Yeah, it's 3 and 4. Remember, those are the easier ones, right? When your A value is 1, it's a little easier to factor those. All right, and then set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So x equals positive 3 and x equals 4. Good. Number 3 is probably one of the easiest problems I could give you, and it is the most missed. People overthink things. All right, first step, what do? Set it equal to 0. So we're going to have 4x squared. What happens to the 3x when I move it? Minus 3x. Okay. All right, then we're supposed to factor. Is there a GCF? Is there a GCF? Don't forget to look at your variables. Yeah, there's an x in there. Okay, so if I take out an x, what do we have left?
3.
4x minus 3. Does that factor further? In order for me to factor further, that's got two terms there. Do you have perfect squares? Or both? No, so it's not going to factor any further. So this, make a note of this, guys. This is like the easiest problem I give, and it is most missed, because people forget to take out a GCF, or they do, and they're like struggling to factor this. If you don't have an x squared anymore, it doesn't factor any further, okay? All right, so then set each factor equal to 0. So we have x equals 0, and 4x minus 3 equals 0. So, okay, x equals 0, that one's already solved. What about when I solve this one? So we get 4x equals 3, and then how do I get x by itself? Good, and then divide. So x equals 3/4. Again, if you're getting comfortable and you can solve without showing the step to solve, I'm okay with that, okay? Because I'll eventually kind of get that way and I'll stop showing it once we get a little more comfortable with the process. How we doing back there, boys? We good? Yeah, question?
So, in our answer format, is it okay if we write x equals, for example, 3 comma 4.
Yes.
Instead of writing.
Absolutely, yeah. So just everybody's okay with Quinn's question. He asked, is it okay, instead of writing x equals 3 and x equals 4, can he write x equals 3 comma 4 and just list them? Absolutely. And once I stop showing my work and solving, I will do this every time. I'm only writing them separate now so you can kind of see the process and what's going on.
How both those numbers are. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because eventually we'll get to a point where I'll factor and go straight to answer. Even over here, factor, straight to answer. Like I'll stop showing all the work in between there. All right, number 4. Negative 2x squared plus 18 equals 0. It's already said equal to 0. I like that. So we're ready to factor. GCF? Ooh, negative 2. Good. Remember that first one's negative? Got to take it out. But be very careful, because what happens when you take out a negative? What happens to your signs? They're going to change. So we're going to get an x squared, and this becomes negative 9. Ooh, 2 terms. 2 terms has to have a minus sign and perfect squares. We got that. Yay, finally we got it, right? These are my favorite. How do they factor? Perfect. X plus 3 and an x minus 3. Right? Last one's negative, so your signs are plus minus. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 9 is 3. Those are my favorite ones. Now, when we go to solve, what do you do with that?
Throw it on to your final answer.
What do you think? You said throw it on the final answer? Is negative 2 an answer? No. Can I finally forget about my baby brother?
Yes.
Yeah. Here I can forget about him. Think about, we're solving for x. Does baby brother have an x? No. Now, I needed him to pull him out to be able to factor that. But as far as does he give me an answer? No, he does not. Okay? Think of x marks the spot, right? Just trying to find the treasure, x marks the spot. There's no x there. I don't need him anymore. Yeah.
What if that it does have an x?
So when baby brother has an x, did he matter?
Yeah.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Okay, so again, x marks the spot. I'm solving for x. If there's an x there, I care. If there's no x there, don't care. Yep. All right, so baby brother, I don't care about him anymore. So we set each factor then equal to 0. And we solve. So what does x equal?
Baby brother would give her.
Wow. That was a little dark, but okay. Good. X equals negative 3 and 3. number 5, okay, what's first step? Equal to 0. Now, here always comes the question, does it matter which way I move things? Does not matter. So would you rather move the 2x squared to the other side? I move one thing. Or would you rather move the 5x and the 3 over? There's no right or wrong answer. You can go either way.
It'll be a little bit simpler to do, move the 2x over.
Okay, so that's some argument. They're like, it's easier to move just one thing instead of two things.
Although mathematically, they're the same. You're literally not doing anything different.
Right, because you're still going to rewrite all 3 terms, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
What would help me the most to make my next step of factoring easier? Would it be to move the 2x squared and make it negative? Or to move the other 2?
It would be to move, okay, I think it'd be move the other ones over, so it becomes 2x squared plus 5x minus 3.
Yes. Why?
Because it, instead of having 2 negatives, you only have 1.
Good. And what happens if that first term is negative? What do you always have to do with it?
Oh.
You got to take it out. Yeah. So me personally, if I can move things to make my x squared positive, I will. Because I don't want to take out a negative if I don't have to. Okay, so I'm going to leave the 2x squared right there. I'll move the 5x over to make them positive. Move the 3 over, make it negative. Because is there a GCF in that problem?
Yes.
No, there's not. But if I had moved the 2x squared to the other side and made it negative, I would have had to take out a -1 as my first step. But why? But if the first one's negative, you have to. Okay, so if I keep my x squared positive, I don't have to worry about that. So no GCF, we'll set up our parentheses. What are my signs? Good, plus and minus, because that last one's negative. Options for A, 1 and 2, so 1x and 2x. Options for C, 1 and 3. Want to go 1 and 3 or 3 and 1? 3 and 1. If we check, that gives me 6x. Hello. This gives me 6x minus 1x. 6 minus 1 is 5. It actually does work. There we go. All right, so we're factored, and then we set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So what does x equal here? Just 3? -3. And what about over here? It is half. Good. Again, if you need to show your work on that, by all means, please show your work. But you're adding 1, and then you're going to have to divide by 2. So he's right, it is half. I'm just that lazy mathematician that I don't want to write it if I don't have to. How are we feeling with solving so far? Not bad.
I'm sure it's going to get worse.
It always gets worse.
I'm sorry, where do you live by?
Always gets worse. Welcome to life. All right, what about number 6? What do you want to do first there? Good, I want to make it equal to 0. So my x squared is positive, so I don't want to move that. So I'm going to move the 6x over. Where does the 6x go when I move it? Good. It's going to go in between. So that comes over as minus 6x, and I still have the -2 there. But yeah, be careful. They need to make sure they're in the right order. Your x squared, then your x, then your number. Okay? All right, first rule of factoring, GCF, which is 2. Good. We can take 2 out of here. All right, so if we take out a 2, we're left with 10x squared minus 3x minus 1. Don't forget the 1. I have a few people still going, oh, 2 divided by 2, and they just like don't even write it down. That's 1. Okay. All right. Can we factor that further? Maybe yes. Well, what are my signs? My last one's negative. Plus and a minus. Options for A. 5 and 2. There you go. And 1 and 10. So you want to go 1 and 10 or 2 and 5? 2 and 5. 2x, 5x. Options for C. Just 1 and 1. Ooh, did it work on our first try? That's going to give me 5x minus 2x. My signs are backwards, yeah. Right, so it should be a 2x minus 1 and a 5x plus 1. All right, when I go to solve, baby brother, does he matter? Why does he not matter? There's no x, okay? X marks the spot. Baby brother in this case does not matter because there's no x. But we're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Good, that one's half. And this one?
Negative half?
Not negative half. It is negative.
The previous one.
This one, you'd have to add 1 to both sides
Oh.
to make it positive. What about this one? Negative 1/5. Your first step would be to subtract the 1 and then divide by 5. Again, if that's throwing you, sorry, sometimes I'm lazier than I should be. Subtract 1, so 5x equals negative 1, divide by 5, so negative 1/5. If you're comfortable to do that without showing all that work, by all means, go right ahead. All right, why don't you guys try number 7 on your own. All right, so set it equal to 0 first. 4x squared minus 28x. The 48 comes over and becomes a positive 48. I'm happy that everyone's I looked at, you remember to take out a GCF. Oh my gosh, your numbers get so much smaller when you take out that GCF. So take out a 4. We're dividing everything by 4. So we have x squared minus 7x plus 12. And that one factored further. Last one was positive. They're both minuses. Options for A is just x and x. We have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And it is 3 and 4. And then we just set each factor equal to 0. Does baby brother matter? Why does it not matter? There's no x, so he doesn't matter. So then we solve, so we get x equals 3 and x equals 4. Good. Solving's fun, right? It's not so bad. It's not so bad. It's not so bad. All right, number 8. So we still need to do first step, which is set it equal to 0. What happens when we go to set this one equal to 0? There's an extra x in there. What number is in front of that x? There's a 1 there. Okay. Oh, does it? Did you see it now? Oh, he's laughing really good. What's so funny? So what do you do with it? Yeah, it really is that simple. This time when I go to move things, I actually have like terms. Right? So we have 6x squared. It's going to subtract 8x minus 1x is 7x. And then when I move the 5 over, it becomes minus 5. Yeah, so if you have like terms when you go to move it, just put your like terms together. I know it throws people, when I throw the 1 in there, they're like, oh yeah, I'm like that's not so bad. You forget the 1's there. Is there GCF? No. Okay. So no GCF, so we'll set it up. Last one's negative. What are my signs? Options for A. Options for C. All right, you want to go 1 and 6 or 2 and 3? 2 and 3? Okay, so 2x and 3x. You want to go 1 and 5 or 5 and 1? 1 and 5. If we check, that gives me 3x minus 10x. Did it work? Negative what? What's 3 minus 10? That's negative 7x. So my signs are just backwards. There we go. All right, so signs are just backwards. And then set each one equal to 0. So 2x minus 1 equals 0. 3x plus 5 equals 0. And we solve. So add 1. Divide by 2. I'll stop being quite so lazy for a little while. So we get half. Subtract the 5. Divide by 3. Ooh, negative 5/3. Am I allowed to leave those improper? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do me a favor. Don't ever switch them to mixed numbers. They're way harder to work with as mixed numbers than if you leave them improper. Any activities we do in here, scavenger hunts, all that kind of stuff that we always do, I will always leave mine improper. It's just easier. Ben?
That's still right.
Oh, you had the same thing I do.
But I'm still writing all
If I did 2 times 3 or 3 times 2, doesn't matter. What's 2 times 3? 6. And 3 times 2? Still 6. Yeah, you just multiplied in different order. You're totally fine. Nope, you got the same 2 answers I did. I know, stop that. That's contagious. All right, number 9, last one. What do we do first? Subtract the 18. And again, this one has like terms again. So we get 9x squared. What's 2 minus 18? Negative 16. Serge, UCF? Nope. They are perfect squares. There's 2 terms. Is there a minus sign? Yes. That means it's my favorite. So how does that factor? Good. Don't ask me why. By default, I always write the plus first. You always say the minus first. I always write the plus first. Got one's plus, one's minus. Take the square root of each number. Favorite type of factor. And then set each one equal to 0. And solve. So subtract 4. Divide by 3. So we x equals negative 4/3. Add 4. Divide by 3. X equals a positive 4/3. And we're done. Yay! So questions solving. Are we good? Awesome.